Welcome, everyone. The event this evening is being presented by the SJSU Special Library Association Student Chapter, otherwise known as SLASC. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Tina Kremsner-Shing, and I'm the Programming Director of SLASC. I want to give a huge thank you to my programming team, April and Rebecca, and the greater SLASC teams for helping make this event possible. So we are super delighted to have Susan Boyd with us to continue our 2022 spring programming. She has just recently retired from her position as an engineering and math librarian in the university library at Santa Clara University. Congratulations. We are super excited to hear about your 43-year library experience in both special libraries and academic libraries. If you have any questions along the way, you can pop them into the chat and we will have a Q&A session at the end. Thank you. And now let's warmly welcome Susan, and I will now share the slides.
Okay, thank you, Tina. Hopefully everybody can hear me all right. Okay, I'm getting some nods. I'm a little self-conscious about looking at myself in the thing, so I'm going to disappear from the lovely scene, the background, while I do my presentation. And somebody has already asked about the background, and it's one of my favorite places. It's the peaks of Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming. And my husband and I do horseback riding. So we have a favorite guest ranch we go to probably once a year. The only time we missed it was during the pandemic year, 2020. So that's where my virtual background is for the person who asked. And all of the photos I'll show except this first one on the first slide, which I got from one of the university photographers because I couldn't get a good picture of our library, and I wanted to start out with that. I took the rest of the photos you will see. So, and if you like the photos or want me to say what they are, just ask. So thank you for attending this evening. This is a presentation I first did for where I went to library school. And I did it for a seminar class there on October 14th, 2020. And this was at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. And at that time, they were doing 3 libraries presentations. So I presented with a public librarian. So you are getting an expanded presentation because tonight it's just me. So lucky you, okay? Anyway, since I recently retired, preparing for this presentation has enabled me to reflect back on my career, and I'm happy to be sharing it with you. I will cover an overview of my recent library environment at SCU, my career path, and I'll compare and contrast being an academic versus corporate librarian, and go into more detail about the differences between special and academic librarianship. I plan to also discuss the status of librarians, that is, different academic institutions. Some of them have faculty status and some have academic status, and discuss how that worked in my situation. I'll also talk a little bit about mentoring to advance your library career, because mentoring is one of the things I did for years during my career, and I think it's really important and helpful, especially when you're just starting out. And lastly, I'll give some of my own personal tips going forward, and I'll answer your questions. So thank you for joining us. So next slide, please. And sorry about the next slide, please. For some reason, I can't share screen. We don't know what the problem is, but so bear with my next slide, please, comments. Anyway, a little bit about Santa Clara University. I know SJSU iSchool students are probably from all over the world, but for those of you in the Bay Area, you might know us already. We're only 4 or 5 miles from San Jose State in Santa Clara. And these are the schools and colleges at SCU. The biggest would be the College of Arts and Sciences. It's an undergrad program only. And then there's the Levy School of Business, which is both undergrad and grad. And the school nearest and dearest to my heart, the School of Engineering, which is both at the undergrad and grad level. The School of Education and Counseling Psychology is only a grad program. And the School of Law, of course, a JD is an advanced degree. They also have the other library on campus, which is our smaller law library. And recently joining SCU is the Jesuit School of Theology, being that we are a Jesuit-founded university. And then I picked up some statistics as to how many students we have. So we're a private institution, considerably smaller than SJSU. Next slide, please. All right, here's the path to what I call my accidental academic librarian career. And you'll find out why there was a big switch from special libraries to academia. My background is I was born and raised on Maui in the Hawaiian Islands, and it was an easy step to go to college. I just had to go to the next island of Oahu, where I attended the University of Hawaii at Manoa. I got my BA in psychology there and my MLS there. And then I moved to the Bay Area and had my first permanent job at GTE Government Systems. It is no longer at that location. It's run now a bunch of townhomes. So that's gone anyway. So that was my first 3 years with a defense contractor. For that, working for people that work with the military, you need security clearances. So that was a different additional hurdle that needed to be jumped. Then I spent 20 years, which was at a facility close by to where GTE was in Mountain View. I switched over to the Nortel Networks Information Research Network and spent 20 years there. Then it was on to Santa Clara University for the last half of my career. The photograph again is of our library building, and all the celebrations are just an aside that we have a day of giving every year, and the students do a big thank you celebration to all the donations that come into the university and the people that donate. All right, so back to our building. There are surprisingly 3 departments in one building, 4 floors, 1 below ground and 3 above. And the biggest department is the IT, and that includes the data center for the whole campus. The smallest department is academic technology, which includes media services, the IT help desk, and our 2 technical trainers. And then there's the university library, which reports to the provost. The other 2 departments reports to the chief information officer of the university. But I think most academic institutions do report to the provost, so it's a common reporting structure. The building opened with much fanfare in March 2008. And I think these statistics might be a little behind, but they're the ones I could find about the size of our collection. Since we have a fairly new building, what we had to do was tear down the old building. So what we did with the collection is, before the old building was torn down, an automated retrieval system was housed behind the current building. And what the ARS is, as we call it, is a huge storage facility. It's something like you might see in a Amazon warehouse. There are thousands of steel bins, and everything's barcoded and retrievable through that barcode. So that's where most of our collection was while this new facility was being built. And when the new building was completed, we ran statistics, and the more used items were brought out back on the shelves on the bottom floor mostly, and the rest stayed in the ARS. So that's a pretty neat feature and something our visitors really like to see. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm starting on the differences between the corporate world and the academic library world. And I'm kind of glad that I'm a pack rat, and I'm going to have to work on this since I'm retired now. And I still had some paperwork from more than 20 years ago in which I found the Nortel Library Systems mission statement. And as you can tell, I won't read it. It is focused on the company's business, not a surprise. Everything, all work goes to the company's bottom line and providing information for good business decisions. As for the contrast, the mission statement for the University Library at SCU is focused on intellectual growth, lifelong learning, and social responsibility. And we provide services to support student learning and faculty teaching. So all the emphasis academic-wise is on the students, the faculty teaching. It's not there, but I also did support the faculty research. But since we are a teaching institution, that is the focus, but that's not to say that faculty research doesn't need support also. Next slide, please. So you might ask, what happened that I made a big switch in the middle of my career from this corporate library system to academia? So in 1981, I started working at Bell Northern Research. It was the R&D arm of the Canadian system, the phone system, Bell Canada, and Northern Telecom. So it did the research for those two entities. And I really found this work doing basic research for the telecom industry very interesting, very challenging. And we had some of the leaders in the telecom field working at our facility located in Mountain View. And so that went along till 1989. And in 1989, B&R merged into Northern Telecom. And they closed our Mountain View location and moved us to the Northern Telecom location based in Santa Clara. Okay, so Northern Telecom itself is a worldwide company, but they had certain product development in Santa Clara. And to support the research needs of the company, B&R, Northern Telecom, and Bell Canada had a network of libraries to support the Canadian-based worldwide company. The main library was in Ottawa. There were 30-some people there. And they kind of coordinated things between the library. They provided our online server and did some centralized cataloging for the smaller satellite locations. So again, going back to 1989, when we moved to Santa Clara, the library function changed from pure research to product support, whether it was for technology, which was phone switching systems, or the marketing and sales of those systems. So honestly, I enjoyed the B&R part of this work more than the very get the product, grind the product out that and sell it phase that came in when we were merged into Northern Telecom. That was a pretty sad part about that switch in 1989. And then the company decided to change its name just to Nortel. And in 1998, when they bought the company Bay Networks, they changed their name to Nortel Networks. And the real downer part happened in 2001 when the dot-com bubble burst and the company collapsed. It collapsed so much, it laid off 60,000 of 90,000 employees worldwide. And all this led to an eventual bankruptcy filing in 2009. If you want the grody details of this horrendous crash, usually I tell students not to use Wikipedia, but I found the Wikipedia article had some good sources, and I kind of mentally thought about what happened, and they were pretty close to it. So want the grody details, you can read the Wikipedia article, or if you want a 5-minute summary of what happened to Nortel Networks, go look at the YouTube video. It's quite amusing. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you, Tina. Going back to my more recent position, so what were my roles and responsibilities? The main one was being the subject specialist and the library liaison to the School of Engineering and the Math Department. You might ask, why the Math Department? The Math Department is under Arts and Sciences, separate from the School of Engineering. But it was because the professors in the Math Department also taught sometimes in the computer science and engineering department. So it made sense to lump the Math Department in with the School of Engineering as far as the library services were concerned. So all of the engineering related questions, if they couldn't be answered by my other colleagues, were routed to me. So that was my role as the liaison to the School of Engineering. I had reference duties. All of us every quarter, we're on the quarter system, would work out reference schedules every quarter. So we do it virtually, especially during the pandemic. And now that things have settled down a little more and our students are back on campus, we conduct virtual and in-person reference appointments. They may make those appointments online. We haven't had a physical reference desk for librarians for years. We do have a library help desk that is manned by our specialists and our student assistants. And both are trained to know, hopefully, this is what our hope is, when they need to call a librarian out because it is more of a reference question that a librarian should handle. So we get called out to the reference desk if they need help out there. This has seemed to work very well. We have a lot more time that way, that we don't sit at the desk and hope for questions. Okay. So we find that works for us. Another big part of my job was information literacy instruction. These were for English comp classes, of which there are too many for the librarian that has the English department to do. So we share literacy instruction for the many English comp classes. And I also had some classes for the engineering or math classes. So the first 4 to 6 weeks of the quarter, that took up a lot of my time. And of course, I also did collection development for the engineering and math subjects. I had some management roles the last year plus of my career at SCU, which I inherited upon my supervisor's retirement. I was in charge of the reference service for the SCU location. Since we are a Jesuit college, we have a consortium of the Jesuit colleges and universities in the United States that shares a virtual reference system. It's run on library help software. And I coordinated that at our location, and also coordinated the RefWorks product, which is citation management for SCU. I sometimes taught RefWorks and troubleshooted any problems that might come up. And the photos that left is one of our teaching labs. On the middle is our ARS, and the photo on the right is a lovely mural done by one of our student assistants. Next slide, please. So what are the rewards of academic librarianship? Some pertain particularly to me, and some are in general. As you can see, we have a beautiful campus. That's the first thing I thought when I went to the SCU campus. I have a photo down there of the annual spring bloom of our wisteria, which is almost as old as a school. And it's something that I look forward to every spring. So that's coming soon to SCU, since it is going into March now. But it's just a beautiful campus. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed working with students, faculty, and staff. Quite different from working with employees in a company, right? Especially students, okay? They can be a challenge. And faculty work was good, and I worked with the other library staff and the staff at SCU. SCU, probably because some of the Jesuit values, it's a very rather tight-knit community, and everybody tries to help everyone else. And that kind of Jesuit value outlook is something I appreciated. And there was a lot of professional developments for advancement. We are not tenure track at SCU, we're academic staff, which is an area between above staff but below faculty. But anyway, if you were expected to advance, you got your professional development paid for. The only thing that wasn't paid for was you were on your own as far as which professional organizations you wanted to join, okay? And teaching rewards. Sometimes few and far between, but it was really nice when students would tell you, oh, wow, I got it. I know how to search that database, right? And I can get my paper done. And sometimes they were so thrilled. And some of the classes were generally enjoyable? It depended. Someone told me classes have personalities. So some of the classes were very enjoyable, and some of the classes had a very negative personality. So it wasn't that enjoyable. So it depended for those teaching rewards that you can get from your teaching. So intellectual rewards, there was always something going on campus, such as speakers, art exhibit, music. So that was an additional bonus to working on a campus. And our campus technology always tried to be up on things. And if you needed technology training, it was there. And they were very accessible classes for just an hour or two. So they really helped every time the technology on campus changed. And being a Jesuit institution, there were a lot of ways to help others on campus and the community. And when I talk about one of the categories for advancement, some of those volunteer opportunities came in handy. All right, quickly, the photos on the bottom. On the left is a welcome fest that the library has every fall. And those are postcards, library postcards. We paid for the students' postage, and it's one of the fun activities they enjoyed during Welcome Fest. I talked about the beautiful campus. The second from the right photo is something I'm very proud of that we accomplished in 2017. The library won the ACRL Excellence in Academic Libraries Award. And on the right is, I think, the biggest community event the campus has had, and I'm proud that the library sponsored it along with the physics department. It was the solar eclipse of August 21st, 2017, when we had a big crowd on hand, and the physics department brought telescopes out and everybody had a great time. So activities like that were very enjoyable. Next slide, please. Okay, comparison of the academic versus special librarian experience. The similarities I could think of was cubicle offices and doing collection development. Those two were similar. Therein, the similarity ends. So teaching was different. A lot of teaching in academia, teaching many students versus doing research for employees. Mostly they wanted you to do it. Sometimes they would want to do it themselves, and then you taught them how to search the databases. So a lot more teaching in academia. So the work hours. I'm afraid here the corporate hours went out. You got the same hours at the employees, usually 40-hour a week, Monday to Friday, unless you had to do some overtime. But in academia, night hours and weekend hours will come up. It's unavoidable. You have to keep the library open a lot more longer hours than a corporate library. Reference. Academia, you need to get a handle on all topics to do reference. And it was a big learning curve for me when I first started, because with the corporate situation, you were just to know the information specifically to the company's business, which is, for me, was engineering and marketing business information. For the size of the library staff and the size of the library, both of the corporate was much smaller. Okay. And as I mentioned with what happened to Nortel Networks, where I spent the first 20 years of my career, things in corporations, especially in Silicon Valley, are not that stable. I felt I was lucky for the company fortunes the last 20 years. So academic libraries are much more stable. And as far as advancement, the larger academic library staff to me means more opportunities for different roles. My role never changed, but I think if I wanted to move into management, which I didn't, it could have. And as I will talk about, each library has a formal system to evaluate you and move you forward as far as tenure track or academic staff promotions. If you want to specialize, say, in archives, that would, of course, be in academia. Or if you wanted to move into data management, again, that would probably be in the academics setting. Compensation. I'm afraid here corporate wins over academia. This is just my opinion. I think I did see a note. I did read an article a while ago that for-profit companies have higher salaries for librarians than any other sector. But what you pay for the higher compensation in the corporate world, you might, the downside is the stability of companies. All right, so there's a kind of trade-off there. All right, let's see. So let's move on to the next slide. So I'm going to discuss what people normally ask me about. You get a job and they say, are you faculty status or are you non-faculty status? So I thought I'd go over that, in that most of you are students and you might like to know about the process. First of all, I have a source here called, I have a URL link to academic librarian status, and they go over these categories there, and they're trying to get a list together of which libraries have faculty status or non-faculty status. So you can go to that. If you're considering being an academic library, you can go to that website and check. So there's places with librarians with full faculty status and tenure. And I believe most of the CSUs, including San Jose State, have that. Sometimes there are institutions where the librarians have faculty status, but no tenure. And tenure means indefinite, let's see, an indefinite appointment. In other words, no end to your job appointment. Okay. And then there's librarians with a mix of professional status. I've seen these in job ads where some positions are faculty status and some are not, or some have tenure and some don't. There can be a mix. And then there are librarians without faculty status. They could be academics, called academic staff. And SCU falls in the last category, librarians without faculty status, but with status similar to tenure. And I'll go over what that entails, because that is my experience with the one academic situation I worked in. Right. Before we leave, just a word about the photos. Two of them are from the outside of the building. Our newest building is a STEM building that just opened this past October, and it now has superseded the building the library is in as the largest building on the SCU campus. It's engineering and science together. And it's a real showy building. If you ever visit campus, you can't miss it. And in the middle photo is of the most dramatic space in the whole building, which is called the Innovation Zone. And it's the expanded, what used to be our Maker Lab. All right, now for the photos, on to the next slide. So what's academic status like? Back to academic status. And the rankings at SCU go from assistant librarian, senior librarian, associate librarian, and librarian. And there's a minimum of years of experience. And of course, every librarian is required, and there's no difference from any academic institution, I think, to have an MLS. Okay, and as I mentioned, at SCU, we have, instead of tenure, we have continuing status with or without promotion. And I'm trying to think of how to explain this. They're separate, but at some point, you have to have continuing status. And that point is 6 years. And I think the 6 years is a common deadline. So you must have gained continuing status in 6 years. At 3 years, if you don't feel ready to go for a promotion with or without continuing status, you can apply for a reappointment. But 6 years is kind of the drop dead deadline for attaining continuing status, or in other institutions, attaining tenure track, if that's what you're on, if you're on the tenure track. So it can be rather complicated, but each institution has a handbook to hand the librarians as to how they have to apply and what all the deadlines are. So if you have any questions, just put them in the chat. Let's move on to the next slide. So you might ask, what's the criteria for reappointment, continuing status, and their promotion? The most important criteria is your job performance. And at SCU, we have annual performance evaluations between the librarian and their supervisor. And everything on that document is critical, and how well you did it. And we are in the quarterly system again, and your supervisor gets together with you quarterly to make sure you're meeting your goals, or if you need help to meet those goals. And of course, what else is taken into account is your professional growth. This is to the educational opportunities you've taken advantage of, whether on campus or from professional organizations and conferences. And another consideration is your scholarship, such as publishing, presenting, applying for grants to do research, so on and so forth. The fourth category is service. And again, SCU as a Jesuit institution values community service, and whether you do it in the library or for professional organizations or on campus, such as student advising, that is taken into account. Okay. So, photos. That's from our art and art history building. If some of you know the glass artist Del Chihuly, that is one of his sculptures that hangs in the lobby of our art and art history building. And there is a gallery with rotating art exhibits. That's the photo in the middle. Next slide, please. So what does the librarian submit in their dossier if you're going for reappointment, continuing status, and or promotion? The first thing is your librarian statement where you go over. That's why it's good to keep track of these things, your accomplishments, achievements, what experience you've had, and the skills you have built. And of course, you include your CV, i.e. your resume, and any additional documentation as needed to support what's in your librarian statement. And then you have your position description. If it's not accurate, you need to go over it and revise it with your supervisor. And depending on the level you're going for, the management will tell you how many names of and addresses of references they will need. Okay, so how do you get evaluated? SCU has an appointment and promotion committee, and it's made up of 3 librarians from the university library and 1 librarian from our law library. Just 1 librarian from the law library because it's smaller than the university library. So each member is appointed for 2 years with 1 renewal. Okay, next slide. Oh, wait. Had something else to comment. Oh, as far as the dossier is concerned, when I first went for continued status and promotion in 2007, it was all paper. I have to say it was an awful experience because I killed so many trees with having binders, say 7 binders, because you'd have to have enough for the committee, for the dean of libraries, for the provost. I mean, you just killed a lot of trees. But 10 years later, when I went for another promotion, it was all electronic, and hallelujah, thank goodness. That's what I remember about doing dossiers. Just wanted to share that. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay. As I mentioned, something I love to do during my career is being a mentor. And I was a mentor for these programs. And the photo is of the person I mentored for the first item, the ACRL Josie Spectrum Scholar Mentor Program. It was for 3 years, which is a long haul. It's for what we call today BIPOC students of color. And the photo is that we got to meet at her school, UCLA, at the National Diversity in Libraries Conference. And so we still remain in touch. Actually, I found being a mentor a great place to make friends. So it's quite amazing that a library student like she was is now at, she worked first at UCLA, her alma mater, and then she moved on to the Pasadena Community College, and she's now a married lady with 2 children. So, oh my God, things move on pretty quickly. All right, so I diverge. The most mentoring I did was for the ALA New Members Roundtable. That was, I think the focus is, as it says, on new librarians, because I mentored all kinds of librarians. Some of them were in public settings, some were in state libraries. There was a whole range. Some of them appropriately were academic, but not always. So it's mainly to get new librarians going, and they weren't necessarily all academic librarians for the ALA MRT. I was on the Carl Mentoring committee and mentored one student through there. Again, we still remain in touch. And I learned from her too, because she is an online librarian at an SU school, or not SU, at a CSU school. And sometimes mentoring helps the mentor also. And the last item I enjoyed was totally out of libraries. It was doing mentoring for the Office of Multicultural Learning on campus. And it's, as the slide says, for BIPOC students. And again, the person I mentored has become a friend, and we still meet on campus for lunch, which is really nice. And my one experience as a mentee was from Pat Reagan's. He's now retired and his title's there, and he was at the University of Reno. It was a pilot program from the Patent and Trademarks Resource Center to teach engineering librarians about intellectual property and patents. And I learned more than I ever needed to know about that topic, but it has come in useful now and then in my career as an engineering librarian to know those things. So that's my mentoring and mentee experience. And let's move on to the next slide.
Susan, this is Tina. I just want to let you know that we are coming close to the end of the event, but I know that you have more slides. I just want to let you know that we usually wrap up around 7:30. I just want to leave time for Q&A.
Okay, when do you want the Q&A to start?
We usually wrap up at 7:30, but maybe in like 10 minutes.
I will speed it up.
Okay.
Sorry, once I get chatting,
no worries. No worries.
Okay, thank you. Let's continue on. Okay, so these are just the mentoring resources I'm familiar with. I noticed the iSchool has a great mentoring program. I looked at the SLA site. The national site is still in the implementation stages, but I know some of the divisions and chapters have mentoring program, because I was a co-chair of the mentoring committee in the SLA academic division. So if you don't see it in the big organization, look for mentoring in the chapters or divisions. Okay, next slide. Okay, so these are my personal tips. The first one being get out of your office and be visible to your patrons. It wasn't hard for me because I was in the reference group. It may be harder if you're in technical services, but get out there and meet people. And my example is, of all things, taking a yoga class in our fitness center. I met a lot of key people on campus in that class for some reason, and it was very valuable to collaborate between their departments and the libraries. So just don't sit in your office. And of course, your social and communication skills matter when you do get out there and meet people around you. And this is the third item I got when talking to a faculty member in engineering. And she said, "You are always there for us." And what she means was I tried to go to the engineering events and even sad events when we lost our one of our professors. So they take note, and when they need you and they will think of you when they have a question. So, you know, being there puts you in people's minds. Okay. 4, solo librarianship is the toughest job of all. Before I got my first permanent job at GTE. I had an 8-month stint as a solo librarian in a tiny business library, and doing everything was tough. So if you're thinking of solo librarianship, just know that you have to do everything. And that is very difficult. You have to be very self-motivated. And I always say, give as much to the profession as it gives you. I'm so glad I mentored. I feel that it was my way of giving back to the profession. And keep up with library trends. And if you find something interesting, although it takes time, try to pursue it and do some professional development. Don't see the change coming and flow with it, in other words, and be ready. Don't just kind of ignore what's happening. Okay. So as I mentioned in number 7 is don't ignore those temporary or contract positions when you're just starting out. They will help count as experience. And this is very important to me since I went straight through school to my MLS without working. So if you're doing that, don't overlook those type of positions. Okay. So librarianship is a service profession. And since you need them anyway for your performance review, and do keep a list handy of your thank you notes and all your accomplishments and what you've done. Because in the service job, the kudos are sometimes few and far between. And especially with the pandemic going on, this will help keep your spirits up. So that's my last tip. Let's move on. Okay, so some or all of you are SLA student members. I just want you to stay SLA members after you leave library school, because I've been one for 45 years because I always wanted to be a special librarian. And they have awesome student chapters, SJSU and at my alma mater. I was so impressed with the SJSU website for the SLA chapter. And I was surprised to see that you could belong to any SLA community with your membership. And they have so many events and educational opportunities. And once I missed a session I wanted to attend and found the recording in the SLA Learning Hub. So there is a lot there. And I feel that although I also had to join ALA and an engineering group when I became an academic librarian, SLA has always been my go-to. So that's my plug for SLA. All right, next slide. All right, so this is just some additional information about SCU. If you're interested in seeing how the ARS, the automated retrieval system, works, there's a video for that. There's a really interesting story about how one of our archive specialists literally found gold in the vault of our archives and special collections. Our archives is on the 3rd floor, but a dedicated elevator goes down to the lowest floor where there is a vault where the rarest materials are kept. And believe it or not, she found Gold Rush gold in there. And the last one is just an orientation to the library that I thought might be interesting.